You guys remember the classic creepypasta, the Russian sleep experiment? Well, imagine that, but with My Little Pony characters. Introducing an apple sleep experiment by MagPiePony. Let us begin. Chapter 1 is titled, A Debt Unpaid. Our story begins with Big Mac and Applejack working another tiring day to get some Zap apples. The thing is, it's unbearably hot outside, but the weather will end up becoming the least of their issues. Two earth ponies in a carriage head to the farm, and would you look at that, one of them is Filthy Rich, the pony who's literally filthy rich. Applejack is confused because he had no business being there until after they made all the Zap apple jam. Filthy Rich was talking to Granny Smith in a way that made her shrivel up. The reason behind all of this is that Granny Smith is indebted to Filthy Rich, and because of the drought, they weren't able to keep up with the deadline. Filthy Rich mentions that the amount of money that they owe is about half the farm's worth. Applejack is in shock with this, but still, Granny Smith tries to get her to calm down. From then on, Filthy demands that they double the amount of Zap apple jam, to which Applejack responds that they already take half, meaning that Filthy wants their entire supply, which is troubling enough to Applejack. To add in another problem, Filthy wants all the jam in 2 weeks tops, or else it's over for the farm. After Filthy leaves, Applejack and Granny Smith discuss what they're supposed to do next. This chapter ends with the crushing thought of both this extreme deal and the weather crisis, leading us to chapter 2, titled The Potion. The chapter begins with Twilight being startled by AJ aggressively knocking on the door. Seeing as she has heavy eye bags and is drenched in sweat, Twilight gives her a cup of water. AJ asks about the weather, to which we learn that the drought has expanded beyond Ponyville into all of Equestria. Even the Pegasi are barely able to make clouds due to the lack of water, and the princesses are looking into the situation but are barely making any progress. AJ, now distraught by this news, informs Twilight about how Big Mac got hospitalized after dealing with heat stroke due to working outside. Twilight offers some help, but AJ rejects it. She instead recalls a spell that helped Twilight stay up at night while studying for Celestia's reading assignments. Twilight tries to tell her that the spell hasn't been perfected, and that she doesn't know what the side effects will be if Applejack uses it to keep up her strength. But seeing the desperation in her friend, Twilight knew she couldn't turn her down. We skip forward to Applejack and a couple others tending to the Zap apples. Despite her exhaustion, Applejack was not finished working. Far from it, actually. Applebloom and Granny Smith were both worried about her, but AJ persisted. AJ, about to collapse, gets reminded of the potion in her satchel. She remembers that she promised to use it as a last resort, as Twilight was worried about its potential harms. Still, Applejack whispers that she's sorry, and that she has to save the farm, leading to her gulping down the vial. The last few words of the chapter describe how she felt unbearably sick, to the point of throwing up. We're then brought to our next chapter. Applebloom wakes up to a crash coming from the kitchen. There she sees rows upon rows of Zap apple jam, and in the distance, her older sister making more. Applebloom is, of course, concerned for her big sis, although Applejack tells her that everything is fine. A small segment plays out of Applebloom accidentally knocking over a jar, and Applejack pulling a Quicksilver to grab it. Applebloom insists that she and Granny Smith would help, which just causes Applejack to yell at her. Applebloom runs away, skipping to a scene where she's with the other Crusaders. The three talk about what's going on with Applejack. Then Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon come into the fray, being dicks as usual. Diamond Tiara becomes the bearer of bad news and tells Applebloom about the whole deal. Applebloom is in disbelief of this, and despite a deal Diamond Tiara tries to make with her, she just runs off. We skip the Filthy Rich and Applejack going forward with the deal. Applejack says that she made 400 jars, but really, Filthy Rich wants every single one. Despite the situation that'll put the family in, Filthy does not give a shit. Let me read out a line that Filthy says in response to AJ calling this whole dilemma unfair. It's about knowing how to conduct business. Applejack stomps her hoof, but Filthy has this to say in response. You all know if you end up needing assistance, you can come to old Filthy Rich. Maybe you can increase your cider sales this season. Tell you what, I'll let you buy back some of your jam, half price, for personal use of course. Rather than crashing out, Applejack just runs to the orchard. The Crusaders were actually listening in on this conversation from behind a hay bale. Applebloom just could not believe what she heard. Applebloom configures a plan to hide a couple of jars, but then, Scootaloo points out something. It's Applejack just aggressively kicking a tree, imagining it as Filthy Rich. They heard cracking. Okay, that sounded weird. But it wasn't the tree that made it. It was Applejack's back leg bones that were visible and were causing her hooves to curve in the wrong direction. Sweetie Belle screamed, and Scootaloo's face lost color. Applebloom tried to scream her name, but Applejack kept kicking the tree, even with her deteriorating health, and Scootaloo decides to look for help. This last paragraph goes way into detail about Applejack still beating down on this tree. It eventually got to a point where her back legs became inoperable, and now she's just left to find a hospital. Now we find AJ at the hospital after everything that happened. She questions how long she's been in there, still unaware that she kicked the tree instead of Filthy Rich. She also wonders if she actually beat up her brother. Some ponies come to visit, but not just any pony. They're basically Applejack's ops. It's Flim and Flam. As we all know, they're basically Applejack's ops, so seeing their faces infuriates AJ. Flim mentions something big, that being Applejack killed her own brother. After that, Trixie walks in, joining in on the gaslighting. The three offer her a tonic that should be able to bring her legs back. AJ resists it, but Flim proceeds to pour it down her leg. AJ smells the tonic, and the scent is compared to that of a rusted coin. Then she pulls off her restraints. Some of the tonic even gets on Trixie's mane. Applejack, now out of her bed, notices that she's covered in the stuff. When she asks what was in it, she sees Filthy Rich's face. This angers her. She then starts screaming and charging at the hallucination. Moving past that, we see the rest of the main cast going to visit Twilight. Twilight is very much guilty about AJ's condition. She never fully understood the spell she cast. The doctors would often ask for her help whenever AJ's sedatives never worked. Still, her friends try to reassure her that everything's fine, and that AJ will forgive Twilight. As they opened the door, they saw that Applejack wasn't there. What they saw was much more horrifying. The other ponies could only stare in horror at the chaos of the room. The hospital bed was thrown up against one of the walls, the medical equipment strewn in every corner. The restraints were empty, but the one in the upper left corner of the bed was gnawed clean through and caked in a layer of blood. The blood smears on the floor and walls show that quite a struggle had taken place. It didn't take the ponies long to notice the open window and the trail of blood that led from it. It's been days since her disappearance. To make matters even worse, many ponies have straight up disappeared. All that combined with the glaring heat caused many to panic. One pony in particular gets highlighted, that being Lyra Heartstrings, who'd lost sight of her partner Bonbon. When we get to Lyra searching for Bonbon, Applejack just disappears. Lyra shows all kinds of concern for her, knowing her condition and the disappearances, but AJ had other plans. She was completely unhinged, and her appearance was all unkempt. All Applejack could see was the unwelcoming face of Filthy Rich. From there, she knocks Lyra out cold. Lyra wakes up restrained to a stump. She was in a state of discomfort as not only was she in physical pain, but she was also smelling blood. Making out her surroundings, she realizes she's in some kind of hidden part of the Apple family orchard. Not only does she notice the aged up plants, but she also noticed the remains of the many missing ponies. Among them included the head of Bonbon resting atop a blade. Applejack appears, interrogating Lyra, thinking she's Filthy Rich. Lyra is all shaken up by this. She then coughs up some blood on Applejack. This infuriates AJ, so she just beats up Lyra with a shovel. Lyra becomes a mangled mess. Yet AJ saw her corpse as Filthy running away. Even after all this violence, AJ still wants to find Filthy and punish him for the pain he's caused her. We go back to Apple Bloom's perspective. The whole situation was kept a secret from her. Granny Smith said that Applejack wasn't well enough. Miss Cheerily said that the ponies were falling ill to the heat, and Twilight mandated a curfew for the fillies. Apple Bloom didn't buy any of this and took the opportunity to sneak out with the other Crusaders. They had decided to have a playdate at Fluttershy's cottage, thinking that she may be the one pony they could evade. Crazily enough, Fluttershy made sure to keep the Crusaders safe, using her bear friend as a guard. The fillies still managed to get around him using honey, but their escape only brings them to darkness. In their conversation, they talk about how some tools were missing in the orchard. Out of nowhere, they smell a powerful odor, which leads them to Rainbow Dash's bag. In the corner, they see bloody hoof prints and hear cries. Scootaloo screams Rainbow Dash's name and runs off to see her. The three find Rainbow Dash all bloody and beaten up. Obviously, the damage was all done by Applejack. They hear AJ in the distance, laughing and shouting. Apple Bloom just couldn't process what was happening. Rainbow Dash, seeing the fillies, went into adrenaline mode and told them to run away. They all did, except Apple Bloom. This caused Rainbow Dash to go back for Apple Bloom and run off. Sweetie Belle tripped over a large mass that was actually Twilight herself lying in a pool of blood. Rainbow Dash threw Apple Bloom so that she could scream something, but Applejack caught up to her and landed a very brutal blow to her jaw. The Crusaders then hid behind a tree and saw that the orchard was now a graveyard of all the ponies. They also saw that the missing tools were used on the ponies in gory ways. Compared to last time, Applejack's appearance is horrid. She's covered in blood and hair that weren't her own. As Rainbow Dash was taking a beating, she spots Apple Bloom from a distance taking a needle out of a dead pony. Rainbow Dash kept her attention on Applejack so that she could distract her, taking more of a beating in the process. There, Apple Bloom charges at AJ with a needle, injecting her with a liquid into her bloodstream. There, Apple Bloom charges at AJ with a needle, injecting her with a liquid into her bloodstream. AJ just kicks Apple Bloom into a tree, to where we get the word snap. To wrap up our story, we find Applejack all locked up in a dungeon, expecting her daily meal. She was instead met with Twilight. She asks what AJ remembers. All AJ could say she remembered was taking the potion and being in some strange accident. Twilight, knowing the truth, just tells her that there was no potion, and that Applejack just overworked herself to the point of harming others and herself. AJ denies this, but Twilight just doesn't know what to tell her. Twilight, still hiding the truth, tells AJ that she was given a life sentence, and that she has no one else to blame but herself. She also mentions that she cured AJ of her condition, but still, she couldn't risk losing her reputation. It also seems that Starlight Glimmer has taken AJ's place as the element of honesty. AJ starts asking about her friends and family, but Twilight decides that it's time to go. The story ends with AJ demanding to know what happened to her sister. When I was a lot younger, I read Cupcakes and saw that evil Fluttershy animation, and to be honest, I didn't like either. I'm not going to deny that the pasta I just read was another what if said pony was evil type of creepypasta, but it definitely had a lot more substance than those two. The whole conflict at the beginning actually felt like an MLP storyline, and having Applejack be unaware of what's real and what isn't really adds a lot. It reminds me a lot of Patrick Bateman and Joe Goldberg just hallucinating the events in their respective works. Speaking of, I think the story would have been a lot better if it was fully in the perspective of AJ. That way, we could have an unreliable narrator type of ordeal. The use of the tools really emphasized how scary of a serial killer Applejack can be. I should also mention that there is a sequel to the story, and holy, it is long. I don't have the time to cover it right now, but I will cover the first chapter. We begin with the ponies having a memorial or commemoration for the events that happened in the previous story. We learn that it's been multiple years since then. Rarity, Fluttershy, and Starlight squabble over the decorations, while Twilight doesn't mind. Then Fluttershy just says something that shook the other ponies in the room. I miss her. Twilight's last conversation with Applejack is played out. She reflects on the guilt the lies she told brought her, but those emotions also left her with the incentive to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. The silence lasted until Pinkie Pie jumped in. She talks about the desserts she'll make and all the possible flavors. Going down the list, there's one missing. Because of the incident, Pinkie Pie stopped using apples in her desserts. Rainbow Dash also pops in, and the ponies will continue their yapping, but nothing crazy happens. We cut to Twilight in her room, hyper-focused on a scroll. It held the opening speech for the memorial. She scraps it and starts a new one, only to be interrupted by Starlight frantically knocking on her door. Twilight asks what's wrong, but she doesn't get a response. Instead, she gets a scroll. The words escaped, struggle, and the Canterlot guards can't recall the past few days stood out. Dread grew as Twilight continued reading. It's been days since the message, meaning Applejack could be at Ponyville. Twilight shrivels up before forcing herself to calm down. She tries to tell Starlight to warn the others. Then suddenly, they both heard rustling. The sound is described as follows. The sound was muffled, but both mares' minds spiraled with all the possibilities. Was it a window opening? Was it hoof steps? Was it something knocked over in haste? Neither of them could be sure, but both feared the worst. Starlight decides to check it out, and as she's doing that, Twilight begins to panic, thinking about all the worst possible scenarios and what could happen next. Then there she was, Applejack herself. I'll read out the paragraph that describes her appearance. Applejack, the orange earth pony, had haunted her thoughts and dreams for 7 long and languishing years. Was standing unabashedly amongst a collection of empty potion bottles. Her fur was pale, almost cream-colored from the lack of sunlight. The wounds that once marred her coat had healed into a series of scars, some fresher looking than others. Her standing gait was still irregular from the bones in her back hooves sitting wrong. All those years ago, deep dark circles lined sunken eyes, and an unmistakable lack of nourishment left the earth pony looking almost skeletal, with fur clasped tightly to a frail frame. Applejack confronts Twilight about the secret of her death. Then she goes on to talk about her craving for the sleepless potion. Basically, AJ drank all of Twilight's potions, which freaks Twilight out because not all of them were made for ingestion. Applejack would respond to Twilight with some Hannibal Lecter-ass dialogue. One of the potions Applejack drank gave her super speed, made evident by her swift movement. AJ uses a smoke bomb to run away from Twilight. Twilight tries her best to catch up, but she ultimately fails at doing so. She even gets injured in her pursuit. Eventually, Twilight cries out for Starlight. However, it was too late. Not only does Applejack reach Starlight's room, but she also straight up brutalizes her. AJ smiles and Twilight charges at her, only to hold back and focus on Starlight. Twilight tries her best to save her pupil, acknowledging she's making a big mistake by not targeting AJ. Applejack ends up escaping and Starlight passes away. The chapter ends with Twilight holding Starlight, before being knocked unconscious by a large object. That was definitely a huge shift from the OG story. It felt less like an old school creepypasta and more like a proper horror story. Of course, this is just the first chapter, so I won't say much yet. It's crazy that Applejack not only made an aura-filled appearance, but she also straight up killed Starlight already. As for the opening, I thought it was super interesting seeing the after effects of everything that happened, but it of course hit the main 6 the hardest. Especially. All of those emotions were felt. Guilt, grief, dread, all of those emotions were felt. If you're anal about these ponies staying in character and being true to the lore, that might prevent you from fully enjoying the story. Otherwise, this pasta can be a fun read. I'm really excited to share the rest of the story with you guys, and I hope to see you stick around. Anyways, thanks for watching till the end. I am super close to hitting 100k, so I'd love for you guys to help me reach that goal. And if you want to see some other content, go check out my other channel, just called Casey Valentine. Take care of yourselves, and of course as usual, please have yourselves a damn good one.